They came with smiles on their faces and chains in their hands. They spoke of friendship, trade, and a better tomorrow. But beneath their polished words lay hunger, hunger for gold, power, and souls. And so began one of the darkest bargains in human history. The day Africa was traded for gold and guns.
In the 15th century, before the world called it the Age of Discovery, the African coasts shimmered under the golden sun. Kingdoms like Mali, Benin, and Oyo stood proud, their kings draped in silk, their markets overflowing with ivory, pepper, and gold dust that glittered like starlight. Timbuktu was not a myth. It was a city of scholars and merchants, where libraries rose higher than towers, and wisdom was the wealth of men. But across the sea, in Europe, greed had begun to boil. Nations hungered for gold, the kind that built empires and crowned kings. And when the Portuguese first set sail along the West African coast, they found something that made their eyes widen, a land bursting with riches and a people rich in spirit. At first, they traded simple things, mirrors, beads, cloth, and muskets for gold, ivory, and spices. It seemed fair, almost innocent. But innocence never lasts long when greed enters the room. Soon the trade changed shape. The value of gold fell short of the ambitions of empires. They wanted something more, something that could fuel their plantations across the Atlantic, something that could build cities in the New World. They wanted people.
And so began the human trade, a trade so vile it would stain the soul of humanity forever. African kings, tempted by foreign goods, began to trade their rivals, prisoners of war, and sometimes even their own people, for guns and rum. They believed it was a transaction of equals, power for power, wealth for wealth, but in truth, it was a trap, one forged in iron and deception. Imagine the sound of a royal court in the kingdom of Dahomey, the crackle of fire, the gloom of golden bracelets, the murmur of foreign tongues. Portuguese and British traders lay their guns before the king like offerings before a god. Take these, they say, and you will be stronger than your enemies. And the king, seeking to defend his throne, agrees. One ship leaves with hundreds of captives. Another arrives heavy with muskets and barrels of powder. The cycle feeds itself. Power in exchange for humanity. Across the shores, forts like Elmina Castle and Cape Coast Castle rise, not as homes, but as cages. Behind their whitewashed walls, thousands of Africans are packed in dungeons, chained, crying, praying to gods that could not hear them over the crashing of the sea. The smell of sweat, fear, and salt fills the air. The ocean outside becomes both a path to death and a witness to unspeakable pain.
Ships depart, wooden monsters with sails like ghostly wings, carrying human cargo across the Atlantic. Men, women, and children, torn from their lands, sold in markets where their worth was measured in gold dust and gunpowder. And each time a gun fired in Africa, another body fell, another village burned, another ship was filled. The Duns made some kings powerful, yes, but that power was poisoned, because the more they traded, the more their kingdoms weakened. Neighbors turned to enemies, and unity shattered. The empires that once stood tall, Mali, Songhai, Benin, began to crumble, not by the sword of Europe, but by the trade they had embraced. Africa's gold flowed one way, her people flowed the other, and in return came the weapons that tore her apart. Centuries passed, but the echo of that trade never faded. The guns grew silent, but the scars remained, in the soil, in the songs, in the stories whispered by grandmothers under the moonlight. They tell of ships that took sons and daughters away, of villages that vanished, of kings who realized too late that they had sold more than men. They had sold the future. And when Europe finally looked back and called it history, Africa was left with empty lands, broken dynasties, and the ghosts of millions who never came home. But this story, though tragic, is not just one of loss. It's a reminder that greed can disguise itself as opportunity, that the most dangerous trade is not of gold or guns, but of humanity itself. Today, the echoes of that trade still ripple through time, in the divisions, the poverty, the struggle to reclaim identity and pride. But within every African heart still beats the rhythm of survival, the rhythm that no gun, no gold, no empire could silence. So when we ask how Africa was traded for gold and guns, we are not just asking about history, we are asking about humanity, about how far people will go for power, and how long it takes to heal from the price of betrayal. Because somewhere on a quiet African shore, the wind still carries the voices of those who were taken, whispering to the world, "We were never the trade, we were the treasure."